Welcome, everyone. My name is Tom Bennett, President and CEO of the Solon Chamber, and welcome to our webinar on international trade in 2021, and I dare say and beyond, really focusing on electronic certificates of origin. Super excited to have our partner, Alex from the American World Trade Chamber of Commerce, for us to learn more about electronic certificates of origin and what they are and how it's trending towards the future. So give me a second here. So, all of our work is made possible by our investors. You can see those folks listed here. Certainly allow us to explore different programs and options and really try and deliver value to you as our members. You can see on that second slide, or the slide that's on the screen now, there is a ton of support from our business community on really trying to determine the best ways for our members to find value. So I'm going to be quiet right now, but this is something that the Chamber has looked at, in the 3.5 years that I've been here. What's the most efficient way for members to get certificates of origin processed via coming into the office or via this electronic method. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex from American World Trade Chamber of Commerce, who's going to tell you more.
Great. And I do need to be enabled for the screen sharing so I can pull up my slide deck. Which is not quite on yet.
I was muted, Alex. I made you co-host, so you should be able to share.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think it's showing up just fine. So yeah, we can really jump right into it then. So I'm aware that some people might have just dialed in as well. So I'm going to try and speak in a way that even if you're not looking at the screen, you'll be able to kind of make sense. This is more just to kind of help kind of follow things along. And really, we're going to be talking about both the option now to move to an electronic platform to have certificates of origin issued, as well as some of the interesting trends or challenges that we're starting to see exporters go through basically in this day, right? So we've worked with a lot of exporters who maybe dropped off quite a bit during the pandemic. Maybe production wasn't as high. Now that they're ramping back up, they're trying again to go back to some of those same customers, and they're experiencing new challenges, potentially getting customs clearance completed. And so we're going to talk to that effect as well. But first, just to really touch on what a certificate of origin is and how to conceptualize it, we often look at it as the cover letter to your export documentation packet, right? Now, that might just be a couple documents. It might be if you're shipping to Egypt or Qatar, maybe you've got 15 to 20 documents, right? But really the first one that a customs official is going to look at is going to be the certificate of origin. It's going to say what it is that's coming into the country, where it's coming from, what the origin of the product is, and who's essentially selling it to whom. It's also going to be their key piece of information in terms of how to calculate duties that they're going to charge on that product. So without a certificate of origin, and in some cases without a certificate of origin that's been validated and stamped by a Chamber of Commerce, that's going to lead to higher duties potentially. It's going to lead to penalties, and it's going to lead to, honestly, quite a few challenges jumping into the country that you're actually going for. So obviously origin is quite important. And on that front, we're really going to be the experts in attesting to the documentation and making sure that you're able to easily clear customs. So We're first and foremost a key partner for the Solon Chamber of Commerce, so we're going to be an issuing body for the certificate of origin. Part of the reason that they chose to work with us is because of the knowledge and the expertise that we carry along as well. So the International Chamber of Commerce, for instance, does have an accreditation chain for certificates of origin. They essentially look at certain chambers and say, these are experts on the topic of origin. These are the people that really know the rules around determining origin and the rules for issuing certificates of origin. And they give them a higher level of status. And that does come with it as well. A regular communication that the International Chamber of Commerce does to customs offices around the world, meaning that customs around the world knows who we are, and it means when our stamp goes on that document, that the customs official is going to know that someone with that higher level of qualification actually did issue the certificate of origin. In addition to that, we do sit on the International Chamber of Commerce and the World Chamber Federation. They jointly work together to maintain an international certificate of origin council. And so WCF is World Customs Federation. They manage the Certificate of Origin Council, meaning that we get to speak to US issues around documentation on a global scale there, but we also are oftentimes going to be the first party to know when something's going on in the world that might be, right? So if something's happening in Egypt, if something's happening in China, that information is going to get communicated to us oftentimes before it's going to start impacting you. And one of the goals here is to make sure that that information gets communicated out to any of the registered exporters against the system, and to make sure that we do communicate as well to the Solon Chamber so that everyone's up to date on what's happening in the world. And again, if weird tweaks start happening, certain countries want to start seeing certain pieces on the documentation, we'll be available and we'll be around to essentially make sure you're aware. In terms of trends that we're seeing, there is a very clear and obvious push to move towards digitization. This shouldn't come as really any surprise. The G7 recently announced requirements to remove any kind of barriers to digitizing documentation across the board for export trade. Naturally, that's going to include the certificate of origin as well. So the push globally, not just on the certificate of origin, the push globally is clearly to move towards digital presentation, right? And to that effect, if you have a digital invoice, you have a digital packing list, but the certificate of origin is coming and getting a physical stamp against it, that's really going to limit your ability to do digital presentation. So you really need to work on how do we get their entire document set digitized, one piece at a time, so that what we're ultimately going to be doing is giving that digital set of documents both to our importer, to our bank, and eventually to the customs official directly. So that's a space that we're seeing quite a bit of growth. The other direction that we're seeing in terms of new changes in the export market is going to be in a significant increase in attempts at fraud, right? That covers a couple of different directions. It is oftentimes a lot of exporters faking being medical companies, because maybe they're trying to sell PPE equipment, maybe they're trying to sell something to that effect that is currently in demand in that country, that's leading certain suppliers to essentially buy from new businesses that they may not have worked with before. And a lot of those shakeups a lot of the global shakeups has led to importers buying from exporters they've not worked with before, right? And that doesn't just mean medical equipment. It could be if a lumber supplier in Canada dropped their volume, they might buy from a lumber supplier somewhere else. And unfortunately, what's come with that, because there's shakeups in terms of who people are working with, it's led to a lot of opportunity for fraud. And it's something we've dealt with firsthand. We've worked with exporters to ensure that everything moves through smoothly when it actually gets to customs, that they're accurately represented in terms of who they are. But we've also seen a lot of attempts for people to basically come to us to try and get documentation who we determined were not genuine organizations. I would say at the peak, we were getting 3 or 4 of these attempts per week. But it's something that, because of the scrutiny that we put and because of the reputation, the recognition we have, we were able to recognize what wasn't a genuine company. That's meant, though, that our name is kept high. So when, again, customs officials get documentation from us, they can rest assured that we did the due diligence to verify the company that we're actually working with. In terms of specific countries, we are actually seeing we're seeing Russia push for verification on documents. So essentially to say that when they get a certificate of origin, they have the capacity to actually go through and verify that, yes, this was presented to who it says it was presented to, and it was actually stamped by them, right? We're also seeing India really mandate QR codes against a lot of documents, the certificate of origin in particular, so they can easily feed data into the custom systems that they're using. We're seeing Qatar really push for options to really verify a draft version of the document effectively, so that when they get the document, they can go on and make sure that no adjustment was made to what was presented to the chamber. And then from that point, they know everyone across the line has gotten the same document. And even though all these crazy different things are happening, we're also seeing the World Customs Federation push for a standardization around the certificate of origin. The piece of good news that we're going to get to is going to be the fact that we actually are able to really satisfy all of those requirements. And just kind of more to that effect around moving to an electronically processed document in particular. One thing we oftentimes get from American exporters is this idea of, oh, we've always been doing it this way. We don't know if customs is going to be familiar with it. We don't know if, our importer is going to give the same credit, the same weight to an electronically issued certificate of origin. It is important to understand, just in many, many ways, the United States is very far behind when it comes to digitization, or really just process streamlining around export, or really exporting in general. A lot of that makes sense. The US economy is much less dependent on export trade than, say, a lot of countries in Europe or a lot of countries across Asia Pacific, right? So the US economy, for instance, we depend on about 13% of our GDP to come from export trade. In Europe, and for instance, in Germany in particular, it's about half of their economy actually comes from products that they're selling to other countries. So because of that, I think sometimes less effort, less focus gets put onto the US export side, but it oftentimes leads to companies who are playing with fewer tools and not really using what the most up-to-date technology is. So just a couple of points that I have here listed. The issuance, for instance, in China for certificates of origin, they're also on that same International Chamber of Commerce accreditation chain that I mentioned. They do 100% digitization for all of the 4 million documents that they do. And so I've got a quote here from the trade facilitation specialist with the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade, right? So everything they're doing is digital, and you can imagine a lot of countries do buy things from China, and because of that, customs around the world is going to be very familiar with electronic certificates of origin. On a similar note, I know in Ireland, in England, in Australia, and New Zealand, we work closely with some of the chambers in those spaces. They have been electronically issuing the vast majority of their documents for about 20 years now. So this isn't anything new, but unfortunately for a lot of American companies, this seems like a revolution, right? In reality, we're about 2 decades behind in getting people to that point of digitization. So what we're really trying to do is get American exporters caught up with the rest of the world. What we've got here is a sample of the certificate of origin. We'll send out an email afterwards that will include the actual sample image. But really what I'm trying to highlight here are pieces that I would say are of note against the certificate that we're actually issuing. So for starters, we use a background pattern that is meant to prevent any kind of tamper issues, but that really only goes so far. The verification and the security that we add to this comes in the form of essentially almost blockchain-like verification that they can get outside of the actual documentation. So for instance, if you go to certificates.iccwbo.org, that's the website maintained by the International Chamber of Commerce. Because we're accredited by them, we're able to feed data directly to them that's going to present if you say go to that website and verify the actual certificate of origin based on the certificate number that we put against the document, meaning that everything we're issuing, you can actually go to a third-party site and confirm that, yes, this was genuinely issued if, say, you have the physical paper in front of you. We do connect to a secondary verification site, which is certificateoforigin.com. Basically, we generate a unique code for that website as well, and you're able to go in and again verify the information on the certificate of origin and verify who it was that actually issued it, when we did it, and basically make sure that there's consistency there. And finally, we do include a QR code as well. If you recall, that's something that Indian Customs was really mandating to have clearance. So it's something that we obviously put against the document to make sure that anywhere is going to be accepted. And that's one thing to highlight as well. The certificates that we're issuing are living documents, right? Our system is a living system that we're issuing it out of as well. So when new customs requirements come up, when new rules come up, when new challenges arise, it's something we're able to do to immediately address them without necessarily requiring effort or process changes on your side, right? So when we added that QR code, for instance, that didn't require any extra effort for any of the exporters that we work with, but it did ensure that their documents are going to be accepted globally. And that's where we pride ourselves and what level we put ourselves at. It's important to note as well, all of these verification steps and stages, they don't just help you clear customs. We are today working with some exporters who are having challenges with distributors in the country they've actually sold to. When you sell, for instance, a product that's maybe a grade B product and they decide to tweak things a bit and sell it as a grade A product, that obviously can come back to harm your reputation. Even if ultimately you win any legal fight, it can still hurt your image in that country if, say, someone's doing something unscrupulous with one of the suppliers that you're working with. Again, we're even as of this week started a process with one of our exporters who had that exact issue come up. And one of the things that's actually saved and helped them in this case is that the companies that are buying the product from the distributor want to see the certificate of origin that was used to clear customs. So you can imagine when those verification steps are there, when someone that gets this document can actually verify what you declared against it, that's going to really help maintain your image. And more than that's going to help ensure that any of the importers that you're selling to have to stay honest. Again, when I said earlier, one of the tragic problems we've seen as a result of the pandemic and the shutdown and everything else was an increase in fraud. That's not just people trying to bring fake product into the country. It's once a genuine product gets into that country, people trying to then distribute it as something other than what potentially you told them it was. And here, this is just a quick slide highlighting the value to exporters. I think we really did touch on a lot of these pieces already, but you know, the bread and butter is going to be, you can just sit at your desk from home. You can send us all of the information needed for the certificate of origin. You're submitting it online, and what you get back is an electronically stamped document that's going to be accepted by Customs International. There's no driving to the chamber. There's no paying for parking. There's no wasting your time. There's no calling overhead to make sure that someone's available to actually process the document. It's really going to save you a ton of time. But of course, the other piece of that is going to be on the compliance side to make sure that it's going to clear customs, to make sure that they're not going to have any kind of questions or red flags. And again, to make sure that the importer that you're actually selling to, when they go to distribute the product within that country, they have to stay honest as well. There's some other pieces that, such as the archive. We do maintain documents on our side, meaning that you're not required to do that, at least for the certificate of origin. You'll be able to rest assured that that liability falls on us, so we actually maintain the documents. And of course, as well, that means we can easily reissue the documents. It means we can easily liaise with customs if at some point you need to do duty drawbacks or something like that. That's another process we work with a lot of companies on. And finally, it is, again, a future-proof system, right? You are declaring information to us. We make sure that the certificate that you get back is going to be accepted by customs. You don't need to do the extra work to make sure that when something changes internationally, when there's some crackdown or some new policy put in place, you can know that this is going to be accepted by customs. So that's really the highlight that we want to present. I know I've mostly touched on the certificate of origin today, but just kind of to highlight, we do other document services as well. Oftentimes the invoice might need to be stamped alongside the certificate of origin. Sometimes, you know, someone might just want to see an invoice stamp to legitimize the business that they're working with. There are other pieces of supporting documentation. So sometimes we see oddball scenarios where someone might want to see a certificate of analysis stamp or something like that. But we do quite a few certificates of free sale. That's a space we're ramping up pretty quickly as well. And there are other just kind of pieces of legal documentation as well, where, again, sometimes it may not be required by customs, but the importer wants to see that you have a relationship with a US-based organization and you have made some declaration to a US-based chamber. And finally, while it is still a kind of an archaic process, we do legalizations as well. I know there are some countries, particularly Egypt, that have additional hoops to kind of jump through in order to get documents actually legalized so that you can get them in the goods into that country. In that case, because of our recognition, because of the status that we have, it actually allows us oftentimes to go directly to the embassy. Egypt's a really good example of that. So because they know who we are, they know the process that we go through to actually issue a certificate of origin, they're actually allowing us to give documents directly to them after we process it. If you went and tried to do the legalization component yourself, you would need to go through multiple different apostilles, which would probably add about 3 months to the time that it would take to get the documents approved. We actually can send it, again, directly same day to the embassy, and you'll have something back in less than 2 weeks in terms of a final document. So it's definitely a point that you want to consider and you want to keep in mind. And finally, really all that's left is going to be to get registered. So we'll work to make sure everyone has a registration form after the call today. It will be made available online as well. But essentially, that's really the prompt on our side to get the whole process started and to make sure that everyone's up and running. So you might be getting that from the Solon Chamber. And again, we'll make sure that you have access to some form of actually registering so that you can start getting documents submitted. Naturally, we're happy to answer any kind of questions as well. But I do want to highlight that once you're registered, if you need extra help or you're just not sure about like a specific field or something, I like to think that everything's very intuitive there. But if you want to do specific training for your team, if you want to just have someone on the phone to talk to for your first submission, we are here for that. You can either email support@awtcc.org, or my email is there on the screen for people that are just on audio. I do hate reading my last name, but it's going to be asonifrank@awtcc.org, which is ASON, I like India, and then FRANK like Frank at awtcc.org. And of course, you have Tom, you have Caitlin as well, who are going to be happy to kind of get the team here looped into the discussions. We want to make sure you're helped out.
Well, thank you, Alex. Certainly a ton of information that that you covered, and certainly something that we're proud to partner with you, on this. Certainly want to make sure if folks have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat to us, or raise your hand. I can unmute. Obviously, some of the advantages here are around time and effort. Before you even get into any of the compliance issues around that, the advantage from a compliance standpoint and the audit trail, are huge. But from our perspective, we know how much time our members, our companies spend driving over here. Like you said, ensuring that we are in the office. God forbid that I'm in the office and not Kaylin, the 50% chance that I forget to sign one of the documents in the packet or stamp it, and then having to come back, et cetera. So I think there are definitely some advantages there. So we just want to make sure that this is, our members or companies that are looking to do certificate of origin processing, that this is an option for you. You can certainly still do stuff, by coming into the office, but we want to make sure that folks know, as their demand, ramps up, or they may be experiencing a short staffing issue, and the ability to get over to the chamber to do that can be rectified by working with the Solon Chamber and your organization. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and just to note, thanks to Kaylin, she put the solonchamber.com/certificate of origin page. So pretty easy to get to. And again, from there, you have just a simple registration form to get started.
Yeah, so I would say the actual takeaway from today is go ahead and take a moment to sign up for this. If you never use it, great, but that you're not doing through the certification process if and when you need that done electronically, and you need that done from your desk, and you need it done ASAP. So definitely big takeaway for me today is, if you're on this call or you want to forward it to colleagues that are in that space, is register now, and then we'll go from there. And there's a question on share the recording. This will go up on our website as soon as we edit it down for the 30 seconds when I forget to pause the recording when I first join the meeting. So yes, that will be shared, but encourage folks to to register and then go from there. And like Alex said, Kaylin and I are here to answer any questions. If we don't have the answer, we'll get you in contact with Alex and his team. So I would say, we schedule it from 12 to 12:45. We're going to get done 15 minutes early. If folks use that 15 minutes wisely, because your schedule is blocked, people think that you are in a Zoom meeting. So, but thank you to everybody for hopping on today, and we look forward to this partnership with AWTCC, and everyone have a great day, rest of the week, and we'll talk soon.
Great. And thanks, Tom, again, for putting everything together today.
Janet, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say thanks for the information.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for hopping on.